In this video, we're going to recap on putting a photographic texture on each of the sides of an object. We're going to be nice and simple in this one and just use a cube. So we've looked at stuff in the past where we can just add colour to the whole object or to a face, but we want to put photographic images to make it look a bit more realistic. And what we're going to apply to it is the side of a crate to every side of the cube. So we'll have this image on each of these sides so it looks like a crate. First thing to say, this is called UV mapping. It's nothing to do with ultraviolet, the UV. The UV refers to, if we come down here, we can see that we've been working on our objects on the X, Y and Z axes. All UV is exactly the same, but it just applies to images. So the U axis and the V axis is just refers to images, nothing to do with ultraviolet. You don't need to know any of that, but just some background information. Now I've got a cube, and you can see from over here that I've sized it up by 10 on all the axes. Just do that again, make it a bit clearer. So X, Y and Z I've made 10. That could be a problem. So before you start doing anything with an object, start doing any UV texturing with an object, just go to Modify and Freeze Transformations. And you'll notice that these all go back to 1. It kind of just locks the shape down so it doesn't get confused as it's doing this, because it's quite a complex thing that we need to do. Now what we need to do is we need to get this 3D object into some sort of 2D editor, such as Photoshop, GIMP, Paint, anything like that, anything where we can paint on it in 2 dimensions. So we need to flatten this box out. So if you can imagine that this is a real box in the real world, we could flatten it out and we'd get a flat piece of paper that we could fold back up into a box, and that's basically what we're going to do. So I'm going to come up here to the top here where it says UV, and I'm going to go UV automatic and click on the little square box at the side. This all looks fine, so we will just click on apply, and you'll see that if we close that down, it's now put these explosions around the box, and it's seeing all the different sides of the box. So we can come out of this, come back to UV up here, and UV and UV editor. What we should then see, if I just enlarge it up, just shrink it down, is these are all the various sides of the box. So you can see 6 sides, 1 for each side of the box. But you'll also see, if we zoom in, that they're not actually connected together. So what we need to do is, if you like, sellotape these together in the right order. So how do we do that? Well, one thing to point out is if you zoom right out, that's the whole UV editor. You need to make sure everything is in this top right hand corner, this top right hand quadrant, the light grey bit. So if you do bring an object in and it overlaps into one of these areas, you might need to just rescale it down, just like you would on. So if you want to rescale it down, you can use the normal tools along the edge of Maya at the side to scale stuff down if it doesn't fit. So how do we link all these sides together? Let's enlarge it up so we can see it all again. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to do just like we would in 3D. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to select an edge. And you'll notice that when I select one edge, when I hover the mouse over one edge, another one lights up. And those are the bits where they should all join together. So Maya will connect all of these together. So for instance, if I click on that one now, you can see we've got these 2 edges selected here. And I'm going to come up to the top, and there's this symbol here, which is move and sew. And that's basically going to move everything to the right place and connect it together. So if I just click on that, it should now have joined these 2 together. So let's see if we can get another one over here. Okay, so I'm going to click on that, move and sew. We've got anything here? Yeah. Move and sew. What else have we got? Anything there? No. What about those ones? Yep. So I'm just going to try and sew the whole box together. If it doesn't work, undo it. So let's see what we get with this one. Okay, so I think, does that connect anywhere useful? No, so we should have 1, 2, 3, 4. So yeah, so we've got all these here. So if I just right click and go to face, we can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we can see they're all joined together now. Okay, so if we zoom in, there's no gaps between any of them. So what we need to do is just move all of this so it appears in this quadrant over here. So I'm just going to use the move tool. So I'm going to select everything, just draw a box around it, and use the move tool, and I need it all inside this quadrant, so I'm going to have to use the resize tool as well to resize it, and back onto the move tool and move it. It doesn't have to go up to the edges as long as it's inside this light grey area. And so what we're going to do now is export this flattened out cube. Don't worry if yours are in different places, by the way, as long as they're joined together, we're okay, and you can keep track of stuff. So what I want to do is just click, select it all, and I'm going to export this as an image that I can work on in, say, Photoshop or GIMP or Paint or whichever drawing package you like. So I'm going to be up here in the UV editor mode still, we've not come out of that, and polygon menu we're going to select. And we come right to the very bottom of this one where it says UV Snapshot. And I'm going to decide where I'm going to save this to. So I'm just going to save this as Snapshot Cube 2, because I've already done one already that I don't want to get rid of. So just giving it a file name, any file name you want, save it. I've increased the resolution of the image. By default it's on about 256, which is nowhere near high enough. 1080 is about your bare minimum, so I've just put it at 1080 pixels, which will just give us a nicer resolution in Photoshop and in the finished animation model of the cube. I've changed the image format from Maya to a PNG file, just so it'll work anywhere, whichever program you want to use. And does that save it to my desktop? No, it hasn't, so I'll just double check on that and save it, just making sure it's saving to the right place. Yes, it is. So if I click on OK now, all that should now be exported as an image. So we can actually close down the UV editor, shrink down Maya, and you see on the desktop, if I double click on it, there's an image of the cube, just a photo that we can work on in Photoshop now. So let's open this up in Photoshop. Okay, so hopefully you can just about see it there. If not, let's just put another layer in. Now, I'm not going to go through the ins and outs of using Photoshop here. I'm going to assume that you know your way around at least one image editing package. But just so we can see it, I've just put a white background layer in there. So this layer here is the cube that we've exported. And I'm going to go File and Open. And I'm going to import the crate image that I had earlier on. Just found this online. So what we want to do is copy this 6 times onto each of these faces. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to, as always in Photoshop, if you're stuck, click on the Move tool, I'm going to go to select all at the top, then edit and copy, and I'm going to come into this one and edit and paste. Now, scale is completely wrong, of course, here. So I'm going to press the shift key down, and still with the move tool selected, shift key down. I'm just going to click and drag, and because I've got the shift key down, it will keep it in proportion. So I should be able to size that up to fit this, one of the cube faces there. Okay, so I've just brought that image in. I can get rid of that now. And I brought it into Photoshop, and I've not set it yet, so let's just do that one more time. So I've not locked it yet. So once I'm happy with that, click on the Move tool. Do I want to apply the transformation? Yes. We've got that applied to one side of the box, and we can see over here it's turned up as a layer. So all we need to do now is, with this layer, we grab it and drag it to this symbol here. So just let me zoom in for you people not familiar with Photoshop. That symbol there, it looks like a piece of paper with the corner folded over. So that generates a new layer. So if you click it once, it gives you a blank layer, but we're going to drag an existing layer, the one with the crate here, to it, and that will make a copy of the crate layer, which we can then move. And then we can do that again on either of these layers. I'm just going to keep going with the top one. So drag it to the new layer. And we'll just repeat this 5 times. So we've got something on every side of the box. So just very quickly populated the crate. Now obviously there's a few little gaps here and there that I can see there, so I might just try and pull these out a little bit. If you do have trouble, so let's look, just let the magnifying glass apply that and zoom in. So if I wanted to move that, I could try it, but we'll keep it as it is, I think. So so we'll go to view, fit on screen, so we get it all back again. So that basically is our box. If you want to do anything, just click on the Move tool. Now, just to demonstrate that these are different sides, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to number them in this demo. So I'm just going to come over to the paintbrush tool over here. I'm going to click on the color swab, choose a nice big red color. The brush is way too big, so I'm just going to take my brush size right down to about there. And just so we can see what's happened, I'm going to, on the top layer, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, of course, you could have a different image on each layer, but this is just to demo what's going on. Okay, so we've got that. So what I'm going to do is layer, flatten image, and then File, Save As, and we'll call this cube done. Save it. Don't want any compression on it. And that's it. So we've now got an image which should match our box. So let's just close Photoshop down and come back to Maya. So back in Maya, we closed the UV editor down last time we were here. So you should just have the basic screen up in Maya with just our box back in. I'm going to select it, just make sure I've got it all. Yep. And yep, so we've got all that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to apply our texture to it. And we do that by coming up to the top here. I'm in modeling mode on this version of Maya. I'm going to come to Windows at the top, and I'm going to come down to Rendering Editors and Hypershade. Okay, so Windows, rendering editor, hypershade, and select that. And we should get a nice big window up like this, where we can choose the textures that we're going to apply. And we're going to create a new one from this long list. We're going to click one on Lambert, which is always a good one for us to use. Okay, so we'll click on that. You'll notice it instantly appears up here. It's Lambert 2, it's the one that's highlighted. And we're going to go right across to the far side of the screen. Common materials properties for Lambert 2. We don't want to change the colour. We want to come to this little checkerboard image here and click on that. And that will take us to a menu where we can decide what the surface is going to be. And in this case, it's going to be a file. Okay, and once we've done that, we can see that if we come down here, we've now got a file attributes option. And what's the image name? Well, we know where it is. It's on the desktop. Snapshot cube done. Open the image up. You can see it's trying to sort of map it onto things already. But we don't need to worry about any of that. What we're going to do is just shrink this window down a little bit so we can see our cube as well. Oops, bring that back. I accidentally split the window there, but not to worry. It will still work. There's our cube. Let's get that back up to full screen. Get the hypershade back up. Okay, so let's just drag this window out of the way. Click on Lambert 2. Click, and I'm going to drag it to my object in my scene. And then I can close this window down. Now, if I can't see anything, that's because up here we've got the modes of how it views stuff in the viewport. So wireframe, solid and wireframe. But if we jump right the way along to the end where we've got this checkerboard ball, if we click on that, there's our object. And you can see we've got all the different sides marked up now. So if we wanted to, we could go back into Photoshop and edit some of these, perhaps turn them around. And that's how we take a photographic texture and map it to an object like a cube. Now, the only trouble is if you've got something that's more complex than a cube. So just to give you an idea, here's what a Coke can would look like. Okay, so that's a cylinder that's been unwrapped, and then we can go into Photoshop and apply the texture to it, like so, and then that can be wrapped around a can in much the same way in Maya. So the thing to point out there was this was a cylinder, and we actually cut around this edge of the cylinder. So we'll just have a quick look at doing that before we finish. So here's a cylinder in Maya. What we want to do is always modify freeze transformations, just to make sure we don't distort anything. Then UV automatic, it's exploded it, and then UV editor should bring us up to our editing window, and then we can start trying to map stuff together. So remember, right click, select edge. If I select that edge there and then stitch it together, those two edges should stitch together nicely. One there, stitch it together. So we've stitched the side of the can together. Then we can choose one there, so stitch that together. If it goes out square, just go back, and what I would do is I would select one on the base of the cylinder first. See which one we can find. Well, let's stick that on there, and then whichever one we fancy here, let's do that one. Stick that on there, and then to make our mapping easier, we can select the whole lot and rotate it. Make it nice and square. And then we just take it into Photoshop. Making sure it's inside the rectangle. So lots of ways to break objects up. More complex objects become quite difficult to map together, but for the most part, that is how you UV map. So you bring it into Maya, you bring it into this UV mapping editor, break it up like this, export that as an image, do your designs in Photoshop, then put your designs back, coming back into Maya, drop your designs back on the original object.